Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's training, the GCPs of Essential Documents, or as we know, GCP stands for Good Clinical Practice. My name is Marla Helly. I will be your trainer today. Before we get started, I know that your team is from an investigative site. We had a brief chat and you shared you're from an investigative site, and I wanted to know if there was anything in particular that your team was curious in learning regarding essential documents, or why your team signed up for today's webinar.
We're just kind of doing a refresher course to make sure we're all on the same page as far as all the GCP documents that we use every day.
Okay, yes. And also I'll point out too, sometimes, and you'll hear me say this during today's session, that a sponsor may request for a more strict interpretation of what the regulation has, or your own SOP. So I like to point out that we always go with the strictest interpretation. I don't know if that's ever come up in your interaction with sponsors where you may hear different requirements and it can be confusing. Has that ever occurred?
Sometimes.
Yes. Okay. And also we'll talk about some of those tricky documents like the 1572 when it needs to be updated. Let's go ahead and get started then, looking at our objectives for today's session. We're going to describe the investigational product development process and the role of documentation. So we're going to look at both how drug and investigational devices are developed. We're also going to discuss roles and responsibilities during study document handling processes. And so what are the expectations that both the sponsor will have of themselves and then also the sites will have? And so looking at those responsibilities and then what needs to be stored as far as the essential document. And we're going to review the importance of study files and essential documents as they impact FDA inspection findings. Have you experienced an FDA inspection? You can give me a raised hand if so, and an X if you have not. Okay, you have. All righty. So we have some handouts for the course today. I have a total of 12. Some of you may be familiar with some of the documents that have been provided. I do have some excellent guidance documents that the FDA has provided as well, and I'll make reference to those documents during today's session. So our first learning objective is to describe how investigational products are developed and the role of documentation. So we know that our Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, is here to protect both the health and safety of consumers. So we're not even talking about clinical trials per se. We're just looking at what is the role and the purpose of the FDA. The FDA needs to make sure that the products that they regulate are safe and effective. So as consumers, we want to make sure that when we purchase something that has been regulated by the FDA, that labeling is both truthful information and it's not deceptive. And so the FDA will review this to make sure. So when we look at the labeling for drug and devices, that information regarding the use of that drug has been collected from clinical studies or for that device. And the FDA also enforces the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. They also regulate processes in which they review both product safety and efficacy as they're being developed. And so we're going to look at some of the story collection that the FDA will have regarding how products are developed. We won't talk about other products that are regulated by the FDA in today's session, but that can be nutritional products such as dietary supplements, infant formulas, and medicinal foods, veterinary drugs that are used, and then also other non-medical products that are included in both food or cosmetics. The Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, are permanent rules that have been established by the Federal Register, by the executive departments and governments of the federal government, including the FDA. This is known as administrative law. And the Code of Federal Regulations are divided into 50 different titles, and these are then assigned to various federal regulatory topic areas and or government departments and agencies. So we will then look at some of these Code of Federal Regulations. You'll learn a little bit about how there are some differences in device studies. Specifically, we'll look at the different Code of Federal Regulations that are under medical device studies. The Food and Drug Administration also has guidance documents on many topics, and this is often helpful in allowing us to understand, well, what does that regulation mean? And this recommendation is what should be done, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow it. So we're going to refer to several of these reference or guidance documents during today's session.